There are nations that are remembered for their wealth. There are nations that are remembered for their military power. And then there are nations whose greatest story is not what they possess, but what they continue to fight for. Indonesia is one of those nations. Stretching across more than 17,000 islands, home to one of the world's largest populations, blessed with extraordinary natural resources and remarkable cultural diversity, Indonesia stands today as Southeast Asia's largest economy and one of the most influential countries in the global south. Yet, beneath its impressive economic growth lies a question that has challenged generations of Indonesians. Can a nation built upon ideals of justice, unity, and democracy overcome one of its longest-running institutional challenges? Can corruption truly be reduced through lasting reforms, or will history continue to repeat itself? This is not simply a story about politics. It is a story about institutions, about public trust, about democracy, about the rule of law, and ultimately about whether one of the world's most important emerging nations can strengthen the principles upon which it was founded. Welcome to this special documentary. Today we explore Indonesia's long journey from colonial rule to independence, from authoritarian government to democratic reform, and examine why corruption remains one of the country's most difficult public policy challenges. Rather than offering easy answers, this documentary seeks to understand the historical context, institutional realities, and ongoing efforts that continue to shape Indonesia today. Because understanding Indonesia requires looking beyond headlines. It requires understanding history. It requires understanding its people. And it requires understanding that no democracy is built overnight. Indonesia is often described through numbers. More than 280 million citizens, hundreds of ethnic groups, hundreds of local languages, thousands of inhabited islands spread across nearly 5,000 kilometers. Those figures are impressive, but numbers alone cannot explain Indonesia. The country's diversity has always been both one of its greatest strengths and one of its greatest governing challenges. Creating laws that work equally well in remote mountain villages, bustling metropolitan centers, coastal fishing communities, and rapidly expanding industrial cities requires an enormous administrative effort. Maintaining national unity across such geographical and cultural diversity is itself a remarkable achievement. This complexity helps explain why governance has never been simple. Every major policy must operate across one of the most geographically challenging nations on Earth. Infrastructure differs dramatically between regions. Economic development is uneven. Local governments face different realities. National institutions must constantly balance regional autonomy with national cohesion. These realities make effective governance extraordinarily demanding. Yet, despite these challenges, Indonesia has remained a unified republic for decades after independence. That alone represents an important chapter in modern history. Indonesia's modern story did not begin with independence. For centuries, the islands attracted traders from around the world because of valuable spices, strategic maritime routes, and abundant natural resources. European colonial powers gradually established control over large portions of the archipelago. Colonial administration transformed local economies, reshaped political institutions, and profoundly influenced Indonesian society. The experience of colonialism also inspired resistance. Across different regions, local leaders organized movements to defend their communities. Although these struggles often occurred independently, they gradually contributed to a broader sense of shared national identity. During the Japanese occupation in the Second World War, political circumstances changed dramatically. Although the occupation brought immense hardship, it also accelerated discussions about national independence. On August 17, 1945, following Japan's surrender, Indonesia declared its independence. The proclamation delivered by Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta became one of the defining moments in Indonesian history. The announcement was not only intended for Indonesians, it also informed the international community that a new nation had declared its sovereign existence. Yet, declaring independence proved easier than securing it. Years of diplomatic negotiations and armed conflict followed. Only after continued struggle and international negotiations did Dutch recognition of Indonesian sovereignty become formalized in 1949. For many Indonesians, independence represented more than political freedom. It represented dignity, self-determination, and the opportunity to build a nation governed according to its own constitutional principles. Since independence, Indonesia has experienced several distinct political eras. Each period reflected different priorities, different governing styles, and different institutional arrangements. The early years focused on national consolidation. Later decades emphasized political stability and economic development. The Reformasi movement, beginning in 1998, marked another major transformation. Indonesia introduced broader democratic participation, strengthened electoral competition, expanded press freedom, and established new accountability mechanisms. Many observers consider Indonesia's democratic transition one of the most significant political transformations in Asia. Yet democratic institutions also brought new challenges. Greater decentralization required stronger local governance. Economic growth increased the scale of public spending. Expanding government programs required increasingly sophisticated oversight mechanisms. Where oversight is weak, opportunities for corruption can emerge. This reality is not unique to Indonesia. Countries around the world continue to confront similar governance challenges. The crucial question is not whether corruption exists. The more important question is how institutions respond when corruption is discovered. That is where public trust is either strengthened or weakened. If there is one issue that has repeatedly challenged Indonesia throughout its modern history, it is corruption. It is a word that evokes frustration, disappointment, and difficult questions. Not because corruption exists, merely every country has faced corruption in one form or another, but because corruption has the power to undermine the very institutions that citizens depend upon. Schools, hospitals, roads, courts, police, public services. When public funds are diverted away from their intended purpose, the consequences extend far beyond financial losses. Communities may wait longer for infrastructure, healthcare systems may receive fewer resources, educational opportunities can become uneven. Citizens may lose confidence that government institutions serve the public interest. For decades, Indonesian scholars, journalists, legal experts, civil society organizations, and public officials have debated why corruption has proven so difficult to eliminate completely. Some point to historical administrative systems inherited from colonial rule. Others emphasize weaknesses in institutional oversight. Many researchers identify a combination of political financing, bureaucratic complexity, inconsistent enforcement, and governance challenges that create opportunities for abuse. No single explanation tells the whole story. Corruption is rarely the result of one individual alone. It often reflects broader institutional incentives and structural weaknesses that develop over many years. This understanding has shaped anti-corruption reforms not only in Indonesia, but across many democracies around the world. The goal is not simply to punish individuals after wrongdoing occurs. The greater objective is to create institutions where corruption becomes increasingly difficult to commit in the first place. Following the democratic reforms that began in 1998, Indonesia introduced significant institutional changes aimed at increasing transparency and accountability. Independent auditing mechanisms were strengthened. Public procurement systems gradually became more transparent. Civil society organizations expanded their oversight activities. Investigative journalism flourished. Most notably, Indonesia established the Corruption Eradication Commission, widely known by its Indonesian acronym KPK. The commission quickly became one of the country's most recognized public institutions. Its mandate included investigating high-level corruption cases, coordinating with law enforcement agencies, preventing corruption through institutional reforms, and promoting public education about integrity. Over the years, the Commission investigated cases involving ministers, governors, members of parliament, judges, prosecutors, senior bureaucrats, and business figures. For many Indonesians, these investigations demonstrated that no public office should be considered beyond legal scrutiny. For others, the Commission also became a symbol of the ongoing struggle between institutional reform and entrenched interests. The debate surrounding the powers, responsibilities, and future direction of anti-corruption institutions has continued to evolve alongside Indonesia's democratic development. Every nation experiences defining moments that shape public confidence in government. Indonesia has had several such moments. Large corruption cases often become more than criminal investigations. They become national conversations. People ask difficult questions. How could this happen? Who benefited? Who failed to prevent it? Could stronger oversight have made a difference? And perhaps most importantly, can public institutions regain trust after such events? These questions matter because trust is not built solely through economic growth. Trust grows when citizens believe that laws apply equally to everyone. It grows when institutions demonstrate fairness, consistency, and accountability. Without trust, even effective public policies may struggle to gain public confidence. One of Indonesia's most widely discussed corruption cases involved the National Electronic Identity Card program. The initiative sought to modernize the country's civil registration system. Its objectives were ambitious: create a secure national identity database, improve public services, reduce administrative duplication, support more efficient governance. Given Indonesia's vast population and geographic complexity, such a system represented an important modernization effort. However, investigations later concluded that substantial irregularities occurred during the implementation of the project. According to findings presented during legal proceedings, public funds allocated for the program were misused through unlawful arrangements involving multiple actors. The financial losses identified through official audits reached trillions of rupiah. Several prominent public officials and private sector participants were prosecuted through Indonesia's judicial process. The case attracted significant domestic and international attention, not only because of its financial scale, but because it demonstrated how weaknesses in procurement oversight can affect projects intended to improve public administration. For many observers, the case reinforced the importance of transparent procurement systems, independent auditing, and strong institutional accountability. Perhaps even more emotionally significant was another corruption case that emerged during the global COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic created extraordinary challenges for governments everywhere. Millions of people experienced economic hardship. Healthcare systems faced unprecedented pressure. Governments mobilized emergency budgets to protect vulnerable communities. Indonesia introduced extensive social assistance programs intended to help families affected by the crisis. These programs represented a critical safety net during an exceptionally difficult period. When allegations emerged that officials had accepted improper payments related to the procurement of aid packages, public disappointment was immediate. The controversy was particularly painful because the assistance had been designed for citizens facing one of the greatest public health emergencies in modern history. Investigations led to criminal prosecutions against several officials. The courts ultimately issued convictions in accordance with Indonesia's legal process. For many Indonesians, the case highlighted an important lesson. Periods of national emergency require even stronger safeguards. When governments move quickly to respond to crises, transparency and accountability become even more essential. Extraordinary circumstances should never reduce public oversight. Instead, they require greater vigilance from institutions, journalists, civil society, and citizens alike. Indonesia is not alone in confronting corruption. Many developed and developing nations have experienced major corruption scandals involving public procurement, infrastructure, financial institutions, defense contracts, or political financing. History shows that institutional reform is rarely immediate. It often requires decades of gradual improvement. Countries that are today recognized for strong governance also experienced long periods of institutional reform before achieving higher levels of transparency. This broader international perspective reminds us that reducing corruption is not simply about prosecuting individuals. It is about building resilient institutions. Strengthening independent courts, supporting professional civil services, improving public financial management, protecting investigative journalism, encouraging civic participation, and ensuring that legal institutions can operate fairly, consistently, and independently. These are long-term investments rather than quick political victories. For democracies around the world, including Indonesia, institutional credibility remains one of the most valuable public assets. It cannot be purchased, it cannot be legislated overnight. It must be earned, protected, and continuously strengthened through responsible governance and public accountability. Why should the international community care about Indonesia's struggle against corruption? The answer begins with Indonesia's place in the world. Indonesia is not a small nation operating on the margins of the global economy. It is the world's largest archipelagic state. It is home to one of the largest populations on Earth. It possesses vast reserves of natural resources, strategic sea lanes, rapidly expanding digital industries, and a growing middle class that continues to reshape Southeast Asia's economic landscape. Indonesia is also an active member of the G20, a participant in major regional forums, and an increasingly important voice among emerging economies. Its decisions influence regional stability. Its economy affects international supply chains. Its policies matter to investors, neighbouring countries, multinational corporations, and development institutions. This means that governance is no longer merely a domestic issue. It has international implications. When investors evaluate a country, they certainly examine its economic growth, they study inflation, they review fiscal policy, they analyse labour markets. But they also examine something less visible: institutional confidence. Can contracts be enforced fairly? Will regulations remain consistent? Are public institutions predictable? Can businesses compete under transparent rules? Will courts uphold the law independently? These questions influence billions of dollars in long-term investment decisions every year. Countries with stronger institutions often experience lower borrowing costs, higher investor confidence, and more sustainable economic development. Conversely, persistent governance concerns can increase uncertainty, discourage investment, and slow long-term growth. This is why discussions about judicial reform and anti-corruption efforts attract attention far beyond Indonesia's borders. They speak to the broader question of institutional resilience in one of Asia's most influential democracies. When corruption is discussed, headlines usually focus on numbers: millions, billions, even trillions of rupiah. Those figures are important because they represent public resources. But the greatest cost of corruption cannot always be measured in currency. It is measured in lost opportunities. Imagine a rural school waiting years for classroom renovations because construction funds disappeared. Imagine a community health clinic unable to purchase essential medical equipment. Imagine roads left unfinished, bridges delayed, irrigation systems abandoned, or disaster mitigation projects postponed. Every misused public dollar represents something that could have improved people's lives. Economists often describe this as the opportunity cost of corruption. Resources allocated for development fail to achieve their intended purpose. The consequences accumulate gradually. Infrastructure develops more slowly. Educational outcomes may suffer. Healthcare access becomes uneven. Economic inequality can widen. Public frustration increases. Over time, these effects influence national competitiveness. The World Bank, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and numerous academic institutions have repeatedly emphasized that good governance contributes not only to stronger public trust, but also to higher economic productivity, improved investment climates, and more inclusive development. This explains why anti-corruption reforms are increasingly viewed not merely as legal initiatives, but as long-term economic strategies. Strong institutions help economies grow. Weak institutions can hold them back. Indonesia's democratic journey is still relatively young when compared with many long-established democracies. Since the Reformasi era, the country has conducted multiple peaceful national elections. Power has changed hands through constitutional processes. Local governments now possess greater authority than in previous decades. Citizens participate actively in political life. Public debate has become far more open than during earlier periods. These developments represent significant democratic achievements. Yet democracy is not defined solely by elections. Political scientists frequently argue that democracy rests upon several interconnected pillars: free and competitive elections, an independent judiciary, professional law enforcement, a free press, civil society participation, transparent public institutions, checks and balances among branches of government. When these institutions reinforce one another, democratic systems become more resilient. When one pillar weakens, pressure increases on the others. This is why governance reforms often extend beyond criminal prosecutions. They involve improving procurement systems, digitalizing government services, reducing unnecessary bureaucracy, expanding financial transparency, protecting whistleblowers, strengthening audit institutions, enhancing judicial professionalism, improving ethics standards across public administration. Each reform may appear technical. Collectively, however, they shape how citizens experience government in everyday life. Every newly elected administration inherits both opportunities and unresolved challenges. Indonesia is no exception. Public expectations often rise following political transitions. Citizens hope for stronger economic growth, better public services, more efficient government, greater legal certainty, and continued efforts to strengthen integrity within public institutions. Observers inside and outside Indonesia continue to watch how institutional reforms evolve over time. These discussions are not unique to one administration. Rather, they reflect broader questions that have accompanied Indonesia's democratic development for decades. How can legal institutions become stronger? How can oversight mechanisms become more effective? How can transparency continue to improve? How can public trust be maintained? Ultimately, the success of institutional reform depends not only on executive leadership, but also on the combined work of legislatures, courts, law enforcement agencies, civil servants, journalists, academics, businesses, civil society organizations, and ordinary citizens. Sustainable reform is rarely the achievement of one individual. It is the cumulative result of institutions working together under constitutional principles. Governments do not exist independently of society. Institutions reflect the values that citizens choose to defend. History demonstrates that many lasting reforms around the world emerged because ordinary people demanded greater accountability. Teachers, students, journalists, lawyers, researchers, business leaders, community organizations, public servants, every profession contributes differently to strengthening governance. Education encourages ethical leadership. Journalism informs the public. Academic research identifies institutional weaknesses. Businesses promote transparent commercial practices. Courts uphold legal principles. Citizens participate through elections, public dialogue, and civic engagement. None of these efforts alone can eliminate corruption. Together, however, they create an environment where integrity becomes increasingly expected rather than exceptional. Democracy is ultimately sustained not only by constitutions, but by civic culture. Laws establish standards. People give those standards meaning. History reminds us that nations are rarely transformed by a single speech, a single election, or a single administration. Real transformation is usually slower. It unfolds through years of institutional reform, public participation, and a sustained commitment to the rule of law. Indonesia's own history reflects this reality, from the struggle against colonialism to the proclamation of independence, from the challenges of nation building to democratic transition, from economic crises to periods of remarkable growth. Each generation has inherited unfinished work from the one before it. Today's generation faces its own defining responsibility, not merely to preserve democracy, but to strengthen it, not merely to enforce laws, but to ensure that those laws apply fairly, consistently, and transparently to everyone. The strength of a nation is not measured only by the size of its economy, the height of its skyscrapers, or the scale of its infrastructure. It is also measured by the confidence that citizens have in their public institutions. Trust cannot be built through promises alone. It grows when institutions demonstrate competence, accountability, and integrity over time. One principle appears repeatedly throughout the world's most stable democracies: the rule of law. This idea is straightforward in theory, yet demanding in practice. No individual should stand above the law. No institution should be exempt from accountability. Legal processes should be fair, impartial, and transparent. Justice should not depend upon wealth, political influence, or social status. For countries seeking long-term prosperity, the rule of law provides more than legal certainty. It creates economic confidence. Entrepreneurs are more willing to invest. Businesses are more likely to expand. International partners gain greater confidence. Citizens feel more secure in planning for the future. In this sense, legal integrity is not separate from national development. It is one of its foundations. Countries with stronger legal institutions often experience greater innovation, more sustainable investment, and higher levels of public trust. This connection explains why discussions about judicial independence, transparent governance, and institutional accountability extend far beyond legal circles. They shape the future of entire societies. Technology has begun changing how governments operate around the world. Digital procurement systems reduce opportunities for undisclosed transactions. Electronic public services minimize unnecessary administrative barriers. Online financial reporting increases transparency. Open data initiatives allow citizens, researchers, and journalists to examine government spending more closely. Indonesia has gradually introduced many digital governance initiatives over the past 2 decades. Although implementation varies across regions, these efforts reflect a broader global trend toward improving transparency through technology. Digital systems are not perfect. They cannot replace ethical leadership. However, when combined with effective oversight, they can reduce opportunities for misconduct and improve administrative efficiency. Many governance experts argue that technology is most effective when supported by strong institutions, professional public servants, and an informed citizenry. Technology is a tool. Integrity remains a human responsibility. Perhaps Indonesia's greatest resource is not found beneath its soil or within its oceans. It is found in its people, more specifically, its young people. Indonesia possesses one of the largest youth populations in the world. Millions of students, entrepreneurs, engineers, researchers, artists, healthcare professionals, and public servants are shaping the country's future. This demographic transformation presents extraordinary opportunities. A digitally connected generation has greater access to information than any generation before it. Young Indonesians increasingly participate in entrepreneurship, technology, environmental initiatives, creative industries, and civic engagement. They ask difficult questions. They expect transparency. They compare public institutions with international standards. Many believe that effective governance is not simply desirable, it is essential for Indonesia to compete globally. Their expectations may become one of the strongest drivers of institutional improvement over the coming decades. History often changes when new generations refuse to accept old problems as permanent. The 21st century presents challenges unlike any previous era. Climate change, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, energy transitions, global health, food security, supply chain resilience, geopolitical competition. No country can navigate these issues alone. Indonesia's geographic position, economic scale, and diplomatic influence ensure that it will remain an important participant in addressing many of these global questions. Its leadership within Southeast Asia, its role among developing economies, its participation in international organizations, all increase the importance of effective domestic governance. Strong domestic institutions strengthen international credibility. Countries that demonstrate predictable governance often possess greater diplomatic influence because partners trust their long-term commitments. This is another reason why institutional quality matters. It shapes not only domestic development, but also international standing. Every nation carries stories of triumph and disappointment. Indonesia is no different. Its history contains extraordinary achievements. It also contains difficult lessons. The existence of corruption cases should never erase the remarkable progress Indonesia has achieved in education, infrastructure, poverty reduction, democratic participation, and economic development. Likewise, national achievements should never prevent honest discussions about institutional weaknesses. Mature democracies are capable of celebrating progress while acknowledging challenges. Both conversations are necessary. Neither should exclude the other. Perhaps that is Indonesia's greatest strength, its willingness to continue improving despite complexity, its determination to keep building despite setbacks, its belief that democracy remains a journey rather than a destination. The future of Indonesia will not be determined by a single headline, nor by a single court case, nor by a single administration. It will be shaped by countless daily decisions made by public officials, judges, teachers, entrepreneurs, journalists, community leaders, and ordinary citizens who choose integrity over convenience, accountability over complacency, and service over self-interest. History has not yet reached its conclusion. Indonesia's story is still being written. And like every great nation, the most important chapters may still lie ahead. As this documentary comes to a close, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The story of Indonesia is far more complex than any single headline can capture. It is a nation of extraordinary contrasts, ancient kingdoms and modern skyscrapers, remote villages and rapidly expanding smart cities, centuries-old traditions alongside one of the world's fastest-growing digital economies, extraordinary natural wealth paired with equally significant governance challenges. These contrasts do not define Indonesia as a contradiction. They define it as a nation in transition. Throughout history, countries that have achieved lasting prosperity rarely followed a straight path. Their progress was shaped by setbacks, reforms, public debate, institutional learning, and the willingness to confront difficult realities rather than ignore them. Indonesia's journey reflects that same pattern. Its democratic institutions continue to evolve. Its economy continues to diversify. Its society continues to become more educated, connected, and engaged. Each generation inherits unresolved questions from the one before it. Each generation also possesses new opportunities to answer them. That is the enduring nature of nation building. It is never truly finished. For viewers around the world, Indonesia offers an important lesson. Large democracies are inherently complex. Governing hundreds of millions of people across thousands of islands requires constant adaptation. Success cannot be measured solely by economic statistics, nor can challenges be understood through isolated incidents. A more complete picture emerges when history, geography, institutions, and society are considered together. Indonesia deserves to be understood in its full complexity. Its achievements are significant. Its challenges are real. Its future remains open. The international community has an interest in seeing Indonesia continue to strengthen democratic governance, promote transparency, encourage sustainable economic development, and uphold the rule of law. Not because perfection is expected, but because strong institutions contribute to regional stability, international cooperation, and shared prosperity. For Indonesians themselves, the future belongs not only to public officials or political leaders, it belongs to every citizen, every honest civil servant, every responsible entrepreneur, every dedicated teacher, every ethical journalist, every student who chooses integrity over shortcuts, every judge committed to impartial justice, every police officer who serves with professionalism, every prosecutor who follows evidence wherever it leads, every business that competes fairly, every voter who values accountability, every parent who teaches honesty. Nations are strengthened one decision at a time. Integrity is not built only in courtrooms. It begins in classrooms, in homes, in workplaces, in everyday choices that often go unseen. The fight against corruption is ultimately not only a legal challenge, it is also a cultural challenge. It requires institutions that enforce the law. It requires leaders who respect constitutional principles. And it requires citizens who refuse to normalize dishonesty. When integrity becomes part of everyday life, institutions become stronger. When institutions become stronger, public trust grows. When public trust grows, democracy becomes more resilient. Indonesia's national motto is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. Those three words capture one of the most remarkable national experiments in modern history. A nation composed of extraordinary diversity, choosing to remain united under one constitution and one republic. That unity has been tested many times. It has endured political transitions, economic crises, natural disasters, social change, and profound global transformations. Its continued success will depend not only on economic growth or technological innovation. It will depend on the strength of its institutions, the fairness of its legal system, the professionalism of its public service, the accountability of its leaders, and the active participation of its citizens. History reminds us that no democracy is perfect. Every democracy is a work in progress. The question is not whether challenges exist. The question is whether societies possess the determination to confront them through constitutional principles, peaceful reform, and accountable institutions. Indonesia's next chapter has yet to be written. Like every nation, its future will be shaped by the choices made today, not only by those who govern, but also by those they serve. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the world's most fascinating democracies. Wherever you're watching from, we hope this documentary has offered not only a deeper understanding of Indonesia, but also a broader appreciation of the universal importance of integrity, justice, transparency, and the rule of law. Because in the end, these are not merely Indonesian ideals, they are aspirations shared by societies across the world. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking thoughtful questions, and continue exploring the stories that shape our world. If history teaches us anything, it is that corruption is not confined to one region, one culture, or one political system. Countries on every continent have grappled with abuses of public office. The difference often lies in how institutions respond and whether reforms endure over time. Several countries that are now recognized for high standards of public integrity once faced significant governance challenges of their own. For example, Singapore invested heavily in building a professional civil service, strengthening law enforcement institutions, and maintaining clear legal frameworks. Estonia embraced digital government after regaining its independence, reducing opportunities for administrative abuse through transparent online public services. The Nordic countries, including Denmark and Finland, have consistently emphasized transparency, strong public institutions, independent oversight, and public access to government information. None of these experiences can simply be copied. Every country possesses its own constitutional traditions, political culture, legal system, economic circumstances, and historical experience. Nevertheless, comparative research consistently identifies several common themes: strong institutions, independent oversight, transparent public administration, professional civil servants, effective auditing, free and responsible media, accessible public information, predictable legal systems, active civic participation. These characteristics reinforce one another. When institutions function effectively together, accountability becomes more resilient. Public attention often focuses on individual leaders. Leadership undoubtedly matters, vision matters, political will matters. Yet institutional scholars frequently remind us that lasting progress depends less on individual personalities than on the durability of public institutions. Leaders change, administrations change, political priorities evolve, institutions remain. A well-functioning judiciary should continue applying the law, regardless of changes in political leadership. An independent audit body should continue reviewing public finances according to professional standards. A professional civil service should continue delivering essential public services without political favoritism. Strong institutions provide continuity. They help ensure that governance remains stable even during periods of political transition. This principle has become increasingly important in modern democracies. Around the world, institutional resilience is often considered one of the clearest indicators of democratic maturity. Natural resources contribute to prosperity. Human talent drives innovation. Financial investment supports development. Yet another form of national wealth often receives less attention: public trust. Trust cannot be extracted from the ground. It cannot be manufactured. It cannot be imported. it must be earned. Citizens who trust public institutions are generally more willing to comply with laws, pay taxes, participate in elections, cooperate during emergencies, and support long-term public policies. Businesses operating within trusted legal systems often experience greater certainty. International investors frequently consider institutional reliability alongside economic indicators when evaluating investment opportunities. Trust, therefore, represents both a democratic value and an economic asset. Maintaining that trust requires consistent accountability. One successful prosecution alone cannot create lasting confidence. Likewise, one institutional failure does not necessarily erase years of progress. Public confidence develops gradually through repeated demonstrations of fairness, professionalism, and transparency. Discussions about corruption often concentrate on criminal investigations. Equally important is prevention. Many educators argue that ethical values begin long before individuals enter public office. Schools introduce concepts such as honesty, civic responsibility, respect for law, and public service. Universities educate future lawyers, judges, engineers, economists, physicians, journalists, entrepreneurs, and public administrators. Professional organizations establish codes of ethics. Businesses adopt compliance standards. Religious institutions and community organizations often reinforce moral responsibilities within society. These different influences contribute to a broader culture of integrity. Legal enforcement remains essential, yet many experts suggest that sustainable progress also depends upon cultivating ethical leadership throughout society. Preventing corruption is generally more effective than responding after public resources have already been misused. Rapid technological development presents governments with new opportunities. Digital identity systems, electronic procurement platforms, online tax administration, integrated licensing services, artificial intelligence-assisted auditing, open budget portals, secure digital records. When carefully implemented with appropriate safeguards, these innovations can improve efficiency while reducing opportunities for administrative misconduct. Technology alone, however, cannot eliminate corruption. Digital systems still require accurate data, professional oversight, cybersecurity protections, and respect for privacy and due process. Technology enhances institutions. It does not replace them. Ultimately, integrity remains dependent upon the people responsible for designing, managing, and supervising these systems. Despite the governance challenges explored throughout this documentary, Indonesia has demonstrated remarkable resilience. It has maintained national unity across one of the most geographically diverse countries in the world. It has expanded access to education. It has reduced poverty over recent decades. It has strengthened democratic participation since the Reformasi era. It has developed major infrastructure projects connecting previously isolated regions. It has become an increasingly influential participant in regional and global affairs. These achievements deserve recognition alongside continuing discussions about institutional improvement. Understanding Indonesia requires acknowledging both dimensions simultaneously. Recognizing progress does not require ignoring challenges. Acknowledging challenges does not diminish national achievements. Mature public discourse makes room for both. That balance is essential for understanding any democracy, whether in Asia, Europe, Africa, the Americas, or Oceania. Indonesia's story, like that of every nation, continues to evolve through the ongoing work of its institutions and its people. The 21st century presents governments with challenges that extend far beyond national borders. Climate change affects food production, coastal communities, and disaster preparedness. Digital transformation is reshaping education, commerce, finance, and public administration. Artificial intelligence is creating new opportunities while raising difficult questions about regulation, employment, and privacy. Global supply chains continue to evolve in response to geopolitical tensions, technological innovation, and changing consumer demand. Indonesia is deeply connected to these developments. Its strategic location between the Indian and Pacific Oceans places it along some of the world's busiest maritime trade routes. Its growing economy, expanding manufacturing sector, abundant natural resources, and rapidly developing digital ecosystem make it an increasingly important participant in regional and global affairs. As Indonesia's international role grows, so too does the importance of effective governance. Domestic institutions influence how international partners perceive the country's reliability. Predictable regulations encourage long-term investment. Transparent procurement supports fair competition. Independent courts strengthen confidence in commercial agreements. Professional public administration contributes to policy continuity even as political leadership changes through democratic processes. These institutional qualities matter not only for domestic development, but also for Indonesia's engagement with the international community. Institutional reform rarely follows a straight line. History shows that progress is often gradual, with periods of advancement accompanied by setbacks and renewed efforts. Countries that are widely regarded today as having strong governance typically achieve those outcomes through decades of incremental reforms rather than sudden transformation. Legal systems were modernized, public financial management improved, professional standards for civil servants evolved, independent oversight institutions gained experience, public expectations changed alongside institutional capacity. Indonesia's experience reflects this broader pattern. The country's democratic institutions continue to develop through legislation, judicial decisions, administrative reforms, academic research, and public participation. Each improvement builds upon earlier efforts. Each challenge provides new lessons. The process is ongoing rather than complete. For observers both inside and outside Indonesia, the most meaningful measure of progress is not whether problems ever arise, but whether institutions are capable of responding transparently, fairly, and consistently when they do. Major news stories often focus on dramatic events, court cases, political debates, economic statistics, policy announcements. While these developments deserve attention, they represent only part of a much larger national story. Behind every headline are millions of Indonesians working in classrooms, hospitals, laboratories, farms, factories, small businesses, universities, and public institutions. They contribute to economic growth, scientific research, cultural preservation, technological innovation, and community development. Understanding Indonesia requires looking beyond moments of controversy to appreciate the broader trajectory of a nation that continues to evolve. Like every democracy, Indonesia's future will be shaped not by any single event, but by the cumulative effect of institutional development, civic participation, economic opportunity, and respect for constitutional principles over many years. Modern governments are expected to perform an extraordinary range of responsibilities. They educate children, provide healthcare, maintain transportation networks, protect natural resources, respond to disasters, regulate financial markets, safeguard national security, support economic development, deliver social services. For a country as geographically expansive and culturally diverse as Indonesia, coordinating these responsibilities presents unique administrative challenges. Thousands of islands require transportation links. Remote communities require access to education and healthcare. Rapid urbanization creates demand for housing, clean water, public transportation, and environmental management. These responsibilities require effective planning, transparent budgeting, and capable institutions at both national and local levels. Over the past several decades, Indonesia has undertaken numerous administrative reforms designed to improve the delivery of public services. Many government services that once required lengthy paperwork can now be accessed through digital platforms. Licensing procedures have become increasingly streamlined in many sectors. Electronic procurement systems have expanded to improve transparency in public purchasing. These developments illustrate how institutional modernization often occurs through a series of incremental improvements rather than dramatic transformations. An essential feature of modern governance is oversight. Oversight serves as a safeguard against errors, misuse of authority, and conflicts of interest. Different institutions perform different oversight functions. Legislatures review government policies and budgets. Courts interpret and apply the law. Audit institutions examine public expenditures. Law enforcement agencies investigate potential criminal conduct. Journalists inform the public about matters of public interest. Academic researchers evaluate policy outcomes. Civil society organisations advocate for accountability and transparency. Each contributes to a broader ecosystem of democratic governance. When these institutions function independently and professionally, they reinforce public confidence. When coordination weakens or oversight becomes ineffective, governance challenges can become more difficult to address. The relationship among these institutions is therefore central to the long-term health of any constitutional democracy. The rapid expansion of digital technology has transformed expectations of government around the world. Citizens increasingly expect timely access to public information. Businesses seek predictable digital regulatory systems. Researchers rely on open data to analyse public policy. Technology offers governments new tools to improve efficiency and accountability. Online procurement systems can reduce administrative complexity. Digital records improve traceability. Electronic payment systems strengthen financial documentation. Open government data can support independent analysis by researchers and journalists. However, technology is not a substitute for integrity. Digital systems remain dependent upon effective management, appropriate safeguards, and respect for legal standards. Successful digital transformation combines technological innovation with institutional professionalism and public accountability. Indonesia's future will be influenced by forces that extend beyond its borders: technological innovation, global economic integration, climate adaptation, demographic change, energy transition, food security, public health, international trade. Responding effectively to these challenges requires institutions capable of making evidence-based decisions, adapting to changing circumstances, and working collaboratively across sectors. Many of these challenges are shared by countries around the world. In this sense, Indonesia's experience contributes to broader global conversations about governance, sustainable development, and democratic resilience. As the country continues to develop, its institutional capacity will remain an important factor shaping economic opportunity, social inclusion, and international engagement. The evolution of governance is therefore not simply a political story. It is also a story of administration, law, economics, technology, and the everyday work of public service. Every modern democracy rests upon a simple but demanding principle. The law should apply equally to every person. Whether someone is a public official, a business executive, a teacher, a farmer, or a student, the legitimacy of the legal system depends on the consistent application of legal standards and due process. This principle is often summarized as the rule of law. The rule of law is more than a legal concept. It is a social contract. Citizens accept laws because they expect those laws to be administered fairly. Businesses invest because they expect commercial disputes to be resolved impartially. Communities cooperate with public institutions because they believe those institutions operate according to established legal procedures. Maintaining this confidence requires more than legislation. It requires capable institutions, professional ethics, transparent procedures, and public accountability. For countries with diverse populations and decentralized systems of government, these responsibilities become even more significant.